we had this like thesis where it was like, oh, can we try to make social media feel more like a window into someone's life versus a wall? Your facade on Instagram and your facade on Twitter actually drives a wedge between people. And so we were like, how do we like close that gap?
Business casual.
Here we are again, talking about the technology that has a death grip on our brains and our lives, and that is social media. My therapist put it best. She compared the existence of TikTok to psychological warfare. I was her 5th client in one day who had complaints about the impact the app has on our lives, our productivity, our newfound addictive behavior. And it is still up for debate whether TikTok is a net good or bad for society, but it's clear that other social apps are trying to be more like it, precisely because we spend more time on it. Take Instagram Reels, for example. In fact, social apps seem to be copying each other when they figure out what is grabbing users. This makes me wonder, is it actually possible to innovate and create something new in the world of social media? Or are developers just going to riff on the same themes until our brains rot into doom-scrolling oblivion? Our guest today is Alex Ma, the 29-year-old CEO and co-founder of an app called Poparazzi. And he's actually managed to find a new angle. On Poparazzi, users don't curate their own profile page, and instead, they upload photos of friends. And their own profile pages are developed when their friends post photos of them. You know, as if your friends are your own personal paparazzi. Alex told us that he became obsessed with the problem of how to actually connect with friends on social media. Remember, most of us follow and watch strangers on TikTok, not our actual friends. He and his brother, Austin Ma, wanted to create something more authentic than Instagram, which, as we know, is all about portraying the best possible, sometimes filtered version of yourself. So what if you couldn't post pictures of yourself? Paparazzi is you seen through the lens of your friends. And this idea is resonating with a lot of people. Paparazzi hit 5 million plus downloads in June of this year. That's 1 year after it launched. It even hit the top of the App Store charts at one point. An experience Alex called a dream and a nightmare for their then 3-person team who had to keep it all running. But as Alex told us, this success did not happen overnight. They built 11 or 12 apps that all failed before they arrived at Poparazzi. What I found most intriguing is that there is not yet a clear path for monetization on the app. Is there value to only focusing on growing users before thinking about how to bring in revenue? Well, Alex is focused on building a loyal, engaged user base, but he does have some creative ideas for how to monetize in the future. And surprisingly, or maybe unsurprisingly, given recent scrutiny, he wants to monetize without going the advertising route, like your Metas and your TikToks of the world. If he solves that puzzle, it could really change the game for how we consume and are consumed by social media. We'll get into all of that after the break. If you're a returning listener, or even a newer listener, you know that we are big fans, actually huge fans, of making sure you have the right tools to invest wisely. Real Vision's new investing course will give you the tools and foundational know-how to be a smarter and more confident investor. You get the inside scoop on how the world's best investors think, execute trades, and manage their positions. You also learn how to tailor their advice to suit your portfolio. Real Vision is offering Business Casual listeners an exclusive discount on this new investing course, plus full access to their Plus membership tier with daily content. Sign up and get started at realvision.com/businesscasual. That's realvision.com/businesscasual. All right, Alex, welcome. Hello, welcome to Business Casual.
Thank you for having me. Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you as well. We like to start this podcast with a little icebreaker. It's called OG Occupations. So I would love to know, Alex, what was your first ever job, your first occupation?
My first job was actually right out of school, and I actually was doing something very different than I am now. I worked in investment banking, which is something that surprises a lot of people. But yeah, I was in SF, and I worked at Deutsche Bank in their investment banking practice. So that was my first job out of school.
Same. Also investment bank, started there, and now life is better, isn't it, Alex?
Yeah, I'm so far from that life. Like I just, it's crazy, but it sounded like a good idea at the time. So
Yeah, doesn't it always until you do it? But I'm sure you learned a lot. You learned how to work hard. That's what I always say.
yeah, exactly.
All right, let's get into paparazzi. It has been described as the anti-Instagram. Is that something that you embrace? Is that something that you're proud of? I guess, how would you describe paparazzi, and why do you think people call it the anti-Instagram?
Yeah, I think it's something that is a double-edged sword for us, but at the same time, like I've always seen Instagram, Snapchat, Facebook, the big players as the inspiration, and so for us, it's obviously we're trying to do something different, and we're trying to address and fix a lot of the problems that we see with social media, but. At the end of the day, I'm a daily active user of Instagram, and I love Snapchat, I love TikTok, I love Facebook. I like to love all the platforms, and I pay attention. I pay very close attention to what they're doing all the time, and on top of that, I'm a consumer and user as well. And so it's definitely not a term that we or narrative that we're pushing. It's something that I think our community and our users talk about. But yeah, I think. We embrace it, but at the same time, it's not something that we're a message that we're necessarily pushing.
So you're not trying to take Instagram down. These social platforms can all coexist. You can open up multiple apps in a given day. But explain to our listeners how exactly paparazzi works and how you are trying to bring in more quote unquote authenticity, a word that is overused, but we're all trying to see more of that on social media. So how is paparazzi achieving that?
Yeah, so paparazzi a little bit different. I just think, I think broadly speaking, you are kind of competitive in the sense that, a consumer only has so much time in the day, and, anything, is really competing with Instagram from a time perspective, right? Like, in the same way that a Netflix or whatever is competing with Instagram. But I think for us, like, we're a little bit different in the sense of the value that we bring to our users. Paparazzi, or the ethos behind paparazzi, has always been about authenticity, but it's the real you by your real friends. So on Instagram, on Twitter, you're building a following and you're trying to paint this picture of yourself, and it's a very self-interested platform, and, people have started businesses off of it. They've created, entire lifestyles off of it, being influencers and stuff like that. But it's really about you kind of portraying a version of yourself that can benefit you. And I think over time, kind of it creates this feeling of inauthenticity, and, we wanted to create something that felt more authentic, and we felt like the best way to do that was to almost not allow you to post yourself. And so on paparazzi, we say the real you by your real friends, but it's different because your friends are the ones that are creating your profile. So you can't post a selfie, you can't post a photo to your own profile. Your friends are the ones that create your profile, and vice versa. So it's just a different value proposition that we bring to the table. It's you through the lens of your friends versus you through the lens of yourself. We actually think that's a lot more aligned with kind of just social norms, right? Like, I think there's sometimes there feels like a disconnect between like an influencer and like the average Instagram user, because most people just aren't that comfortable promoting themselves. And so I think paparazzi is kind of a cool way to be like, okay, like, what do Alex's friends think about him? And and then even for me, like, what do my friends think of me, and can I examine my life through the lens of other people? The main thing that's different about paparazzi is that, it's a friends model, and which is different from Instagram, which is like a following model. And then on top of that, it's you just can't post yourself. That's the biggest differentiator. But it's kind of a big feature change, really. But that one change completely changes the product, because it changes the core of what Instagram was doing, and it kind of allows us to create our own differentiator / value. So yeah.
And I know this was not the first app that you attempted to create. We'll get into some of the other apps that you had made before, but what inspired you in the first place to get into the app creation business? Why'd you quit banking and then get into app creation?
No, I've always been very active on social and on the internet, and I think the internet was such a cool way as a kid. Growing up in Chino Hills, it's not a really big city, to feel connected to like the world and feel like you could access all this information. You're like a DM away from everyone. So always been super interested in social, and to me, social is almost like social media apps or social media platforms are like kind of create and rewrite the social fabric of society. Like, I don't think people realize this, but on a very subconscious level, like, we live our lives and, with Instagram and it kind of changes our behavior and it changes kind of a lot of things. And I kind of wanted to, make a dent and, and kind of build in that space that I was really passionate about. But, yeah, kind of got really obsessed with this problem of like connecting with friends. My brother's my co-founder, and we started our journey, I think, summer or late 2018. And yeah, Paparazzi wasn't our first app. We had built a bunch of stuff before Paparazzi, and we were kind of just obsessed with this like problem of like, how do we connect people authentically? Hence, like authentically was always like very, very core to what we wanted to build from the very beginning. Because I think Facebook always talks about connecting people, right? And I think social media 1.0 has always been about just connecting people. Let's just see how many possible connections you can make. But after college, I moved to San Francisco, and a lot of my friends stayed in LA. I just felt like I was, seeing everyone's lives on the internet, but not really connecting with them. Like it almost felt like social media was like a window, like a wall. Like there was like a wall, right? And we had this like thesis where I was like, oh, can we try to make social media feel more like a window into someone's life versus a wall? Because I think everyone uses social media, they try, it's designed, initially, I think, by all the creators, and I think it was all very positive intentions, but like to bring people closer. But I actually feel like social media kind of pushes people apart because your facade on Instagram, your facade on Twitter actually drives a wedge between people. And so we were like, how do we like close that gap? And how do we build something that allows people to connect more authentically and make social media feel more like a window into someone's life versus a wall?
This idea of a window into someone's life instead of this wall. Yeah, I mean, that's a great point because most of the people that I know who create TikToks don't even want their friends to know they're making TikToks. So it's almost like you're finding this community of strangers and it's not for friends to connect. So time spent is this metric that the Facebooks of the world, they say, oh, that's not that important to us. We care about community and engagement. But like literally time spent is how they monetize, right? There's more eyeballs, more time, more advertising dollars. So what is your success metric? What is the equivalent of time spent for Facebook for Paparazzi for you to know that it's doing well?
We're still very early in our journey. Like Pops, just crossed our kind of 1-year anniversary mark, and we're a very small team still. We're kind of figuring out, how to kind of get to scale. We're not nearly at the size of an Instagram or Facebook or even Snapchat. But I think from our perspective, like, the business models that, Facebook and Instagram and even Snapchat is, have adopted has caused a lot of the kind of discord with the community and the users, right? Because if your monetization model is advertising, it's a great business, by the way. It's like it prints cash and the margins are insane. Like it's an amazing business, but over time, like you have to optimize for time spent in the app, right? Like TikTok is their number one metric is time spent. Instagram's moving into video and reels because you realize that if you give people algorithmic feed, they'll be in the app for longer. If they're in the app for longer, then they can serve ads, right? There's more ad space. If you think about ad space as like real estate, like that you have the eyeballs and then you can serve that. So I totally get that, right? Like these platforms have to make money. Like, they're amazing products, but it costs a lot of money to keep an app like that up and running and at that scale. So you have to figure out a business model. But, my perspective on this, and again, this is my opinion, and this is where I want to take Paparazzi. I don't know kind of, where things will shake out, at the end of the day, but, I believe that like a lot of the problems with social media 1.0 come from the way they make money. And I don't think it's something that has longevity. It almost feels like the advertising model is like detrimental to the product experience because, and I think there's other ways to monetize. Like I draw a lot of my inspiration for building and everything from kind of like streetwear and like, other industries. And I think there's a way to monetize a brand that people love, through merch or partnerships or whatever, or content even, rather than monetize the attention. Because I think if you're going to monetize attention, you're going to have to build features and do things that are that negatively impact the consumer experience. And over time, like you build this kind of like almost tension where it's like people roll their eyes whenever they see an ad, they whatever. Again, it's a give and take, right? Some people don't mind seeing the ads, and to have a free service, that's totally fine.
Right.
But we believe that we can build a brand that people love that's not optimized on time spent. So you can build a successful business that doesn't require people to be on your app 24/7 every single day.
I guess what Mark Zuckerberg would push back and say is we serve you ads such that we can provide the service for free. And then there's tons of discourse on how, well, if you're giving up your personal data and your own time, that's actually not free. But that's a whole other debate we can get into another time. But I know you said you don't quite have it figured out yet, the monetization model, but what are some of the hypotheses or maybe things that you're exploring? I loved your analogy with sort of the streetwear model. What are some of the things that you sort of plan to test out when it comes to making money for Poparazzi?
Yeah, I mean, that's not the number one priority for us right now. I think we still have a lot of work to do on the product front, and growing that and getting it in the hands of more people, and kind of growing our brand. I think the way that we are envisioning what monetization will look like comes after building an amazing brand and amazing product that people love and are obsessed with. But I think there's a lot of ways to do it. Like content is a really interesting way to kind of monetize, whether that's, on TikTok, Instagram, different platforms. I think, merch, I think one of my favorite companies is Line Friends. I don't know if are you familiar with Line Friends? They're like this, a messenger based in Japan and Korea. It's really big in Asia actually. And they sell stickers, they upsell stickers, they sell plush toys. There's a huge Line Friends store in Hollywood. And so, they've created a brand and service that people love, and they give that away for free, but they monetize through all these different partnerships, right? I think they had a really big partnership with BT21, like just kind of like the K-pop group, and they found different ways to monetize that don't really compromise the product and don't incentivize them to keep people in the app for no reason. People come for the service, they love the service that they provide for free, and then they can monetize in different ways. So I think there's a bunch of ways to do it. We're just not quite there yet, but I've thought about it a lot. So.
Well, that's good. But I mean, it sounds like your investors must be very nice, patient people, because aren't they asking, how are you planning to make money? Or do they just trust you to build the loyalty, build the customer base, and then the money will come?
Yeah, I think we're definitely at that stage. Our investors, are very sophisticated and great investors, and they expect us to make money at some point, right? But they understand the stage that we're at. Like, a lot of our investors were early investors in Snapchat and Discord and all these other platforms, and at the stage we're at, it doesn't quite make sense to think about monetization just yet. We have to get to a certain scale and a certain size where it even makes sense to start thinking about that. But I think they've seen the cycle run through. It's like, we are just not quite at that stage yet where we are feeling that pressure. We're feeling pressure in different ways to grow the user base. But but monetization isn't the number one thing for us right now.
All right. Well, let us know when you do have the solution, and we'd love to hear back from you. We're going to take a quick break. More with Alex when we return. The future seems pretty cool, right? All of those amazing new inventions that are going to make life way better. Like, wouldn't it be great if your car could change color to match your mood or even match your outfit? Buick is thinking about the future every day. A future built around you. A future with super smart Buick electric vehicles that can make life even better. And soothing, spa-like interiors that can leave you feeling relaxed and refreshed. Learn more about how Buick is thinking about the future at buick.com/future. That's buick.com/future. Okay, we've been talking about growing the user base, and I would love to hear more about your approach to that. I know you've leveraged other social platforms like even TikTok to promote Poparazzi. So I was looking at the Poparazzi TikTok account. The first video had 2.1 million views. That was in February of 2021. And in it, someone just lists out 3 reasons why I think Poparazzi is going to be the next big social media app. What is your strategy, before we get into the details of that particular post, what is your strategy in promoting Poparazzi via other social platforms?
Yeah, I think, TikTok and Instagram, these are kind of the new places where, our customers and our users are spending time, right? And I think these are tools that are available to us that weren't available to say like a Facebook or Instagram when they were launching, right? But for us, like that's where people are spending time. When we think about how we grow and where we want to meet our users, like we just kind of take a step back and think through like, okay, like where are they spending time? Like where are they, obviously they spend time in school, but launching at schools is like a very tricky process because A, it's not super scalable, and B, like, you run into a lot of issues with admins and all that stuff. So school's not the best, most effective place to launch. But they're spending a lot of time on Instagram and particularly TikTok. So, our strategy with that was really like, let's meet, our users where they are. In terms of like content, like, all the content that we've put out is stuff that's like user generated. Sometimes we'll like kind of, put some spend or like boost some content that, is doing well. Mm-hmm. But, a lot of the videos that have gone viral were, videos that our users made, to try to get their friends on it, et cetera. And TikTok just works in such a magical way in the sense that like, someone could post a video, for their friends and, it shows up on the For You page and all of a sudden like, millions of people are seeing it. And, I think our like kind of overnight success or meteoric rise to kind of the top of the App Store really came from, a handful of viral TikTok videos. And, it, for better or worse, like caused us a ton of stress. Like I remember like, being number one on the App Store, last summer, and it was like kind of a dream and a nightmare at the same time because, we were a 3-person team and it was really hard to keep things up and running. Mm-hmm. And moderate content, just a bunch of different things that we had to juggle. We've since built out the team. We've raised money and we've built out the team. But yeah, it's like TikTok can take your business, whether it's an app or a small restaurant or a business, and like blow it up overnight. And mm-hmm. You kind of have to be ready for that. So yeah.
Yeah, I mean, that sounds very exciting and also very terrifying because if someone tries to use the app and it doesn't work the first time they try to use it, they might bounce and literally never come back. So I can imagine the pressure that
we were so stressed that first day that we launched. I think like because we had like a pre-order, and when we had launched, mm-hmm. everyone was downloading the app at the same time. And I think for there was a moment we were getting like 2,000 downloads a second or something crazy like that. And we couldn't authenticate any users. Like, how when you sign up for an app and you have to type in your phone number and you get a code? Like 1 out of every like 100 users were getting a code. And so it was so stressful. It was so stressful. It's like, man, we just built this thing. We spent all this time building this project and like no one can even get on. And they're only going to try it once and they're never going to come back. It was like a very stressful experience. But yeah, we got through it. And just good memories looking back, but like it was really intense. So
and with the virality from TikTok, you also get people almost inevitably who argue in the comments in TikTok. So I was looking through the comments in Paparazzi's first TikTok. One comment said, quote, "Social media is dead. There's no next big thing. It's Twitter and Insta till the death of the internet." And then other people obviously followed up things like, I mean, that's what we thought until TikTok. So people are debating what the future of social media is. And it feels like there's the big incumbent players who control everything. They copy features for the smaller platforms. But do you think there is space for an app like Paparazzi to get huge? Or is the idea just to operate in more niche spaces? Maybe Gen Z is looking to these smaller apps and eschewing big tech to some extent. What are your thoughts on sort of the growth and the place of a smaller social media app amongst the big ones?
Yeah, I think, I'm very optimistic, and I think that, there's going to be, new entrants and new players that will really be able to compete. Look, I think Facebook, does a really good job. They understand their business super well, and they do a very good job of either copying or acquiring or drawing inspiration from, new things that come out. But at the end of the day, I think like consumer behavior changes so quickly, and it's changing more. It's like changing quicker and quicker with like meme culture and the internet and all that stuff. Like just Instagram. Like think about like the memes on TikTok. Like if you're like on vacation for a week and you come back, the internet, it's a completely different place. It's like it's not where it was a week ago. And if you miss 3 days, like you're completely in a different world, right? And so I actually think that the people always talk about like the rate of, technology adoption and, change in technology. But, as social founders or people that build in this space, I think a lot about consumer psychology and how consumers behave with each other. Like that's changing super rapidly too. And I'm pretty bullish that, that consumer behavior is changing faster than a big player like a Facebook or Instagram can move. So it's almost like, there's no TikTok without Instagram first, but I think TikTok was a massive, jump and leap in innovation from Instagram. For example, like on Instagram, I don't think they realized this until like not like obviously they know this, but like, organizationally, I feel like, they were building for an interest graph, but the way that they built their interest graph was through a follower model. So you had to follow people over years to kind of build your interest. TikTok was like, yeah, let's not make people follow people at all. Let's just like learn what people like through watching 10 to 15 videos and like, let's push that out. And so that was a huge innovation. And that's something that, when you get it right, and you kind of learn that consumer behavior and you can jump the gun on these big players, it's really hard for them to catch. Like, for what it's worth, like I'm pretty bullish on Instagram Reels. I think they're doing super well, like competing and stuff. But I just think there's always going to be room for new entrants, because I would always bet that consumer psychology changes faster than the big companies can keep up, just because they're so massive and it's really hard to innovate and at that scale. And two, I just believe that a smaller team like us that's very opinionated, like, we can outbuild, a Facebook with 10 people in a room, with the right philosophy and the right execution, just because there's nothing holding us back from, pursuing it full time. So I'm pretty bullish on, a new entrant being able to kind of come.
There's fewer layers of approval, I guess, if you want to test out a new feature versus if someone at Facebook wants to test out a new feature. But, we saw, as you alluded to, Adam Mosseri made an announcement recently about Instagram's focus on video. You said you're bullish on Instagram Reels, but that announcement from Adam Mosseri was faced with a lot of skepticism, because people are saying, oh, you're just trying to catch up to TikTok. You're trying to copy TikTok. And we saw, Instagram copying Snap with Story. There's just so much copying happening in the world of social media. If, say, Instagram were to add a feature where there's a separate tab where all you do is take pictures and post pictures of your friends, would that be good for your business? Is that a compliment, or is that not something that you would want to see as a bigger social platform copying features from Poparazzi?
Yeah, I mean, I think as a creator, like, seeing something that you've designed or you built in the hands of like millions of people using is like the ultimate goal. Whether we do it or Instagram does it, like, obviously I would like to be the one that does it all, right? And but at the end of the day, I think like I just want to see my work out there, changing people's lives and changing like the way people use social media. And yeah, I don't think it'd be like the worst thing. Like I think it'd be really tough for them to do, because our platform is just like so different. Like it's not about you, it's about your friends and vice versa. And and you can't post yourself. Every platform, Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, whatever, it's all you posting yourself. And so I think for someone to like copy that feature, it means we've already been wildly successful. Like they're not going to copy something that's not like wildly successful already, right? Yeah. So I think we build with a very unique perspective and a very unique philosophy, and I think our team is pretty well rallied behind that. And it's something that we just want to see in the world, and we're focused on making that a reality every single day at Pop, and we're just excited for the opportunity to do it.
Well, what if they came to you with an acquisition proposal? Is that something you've considered?
I think there's always, something that's worth considering. Like, if there's resources behind it, or, more resources that can be put behind it, or, something that can just like allow us to accelerate our development or accelerate kind of everything that we're doing, that's something that we're open to. It's not, I'd never like say, no, we're not, going to consider. Like, it just depends on everything's situational. Kind of have to depend. It just depends,
We'll have to wait and see. Okay, Alex, I'm going to go back to that TikTok video that Paparazzi posted, because I just love reading comments on TikTok. So one of the comments said, it would literally be an app for roasting people. And another comment said, nah, this is going to get very blackmail-y very quick. So broadly speaking, how do you protect users, and do they have control over what gets shown on their profiles, or are they just being very trustworthy of their friends and the people they're connecting with on the platform?
Yeah, so that video, I'm pretty sure those comments are from people that haven't used the app yet. They're just kind of.
I'm sure they are. Yeah, of course.
And
Of
yeah,
course.
I think with the name and like the branding, it's like it's definitely a very edgy kind of thing. But I don't think users like. I think they know once they use the platform, but how much control they have over everything. So on Paparazzi, first of all, you have to approve the paparazzi. So not anyone can just add to your profile. Someone has to like add you as a friend first before they can pop you, right?
Yep.
The second thing is even when people do, so you're kind of approving who can and can't add to your profile. You can't add to your own profile, but you get to decide like, okay, these 30 friends of mine get to add to my profile.
Hopefully they're your real friends.
Circle. Yeah, and then they're the ones creating this almost like reality TV behind the scenes view of my life, right? And I get to choose that. Secondly, on a per content basis, we think that our view is that the person in the photo owns the photo or co-owns the photo. So on Instagram, if I posted a story of you doing something that you didn't want, like you couldn't take that down unless you like asked me to take it down. So in many ways, I think like we're a little bit like like if you're tagged in the photo and you have to tag someone on Paparazzi, you can't post a photo without tagging someone. That person that's tagged has complete control over that photo. They can delete it, they can remove it, etc. So it's actually like they have way more control than they like. Look, the brand I think was we wanted something playful, something edgy. Like roasting friends is like definitely a fun use case. Like, but at the end of the day, like they're fully in control over what actually shows up and who can take photos of them.
So you can actually delete it. You can't. It's not just like a matter of untagging yourself. If you're in it, you
you delete it.
That's
you delete
amazing.
Yeah.
We've all been tagged in things we don't want to be associated with on Instagram and Facebook.
Yeah, but
That's great.
when you're tagged in something on Instagram or Facebook and you untag yourself, it still lives.
I know
on Instagram.
exactly.
It's
I know
still
exactly.
on their profile. So yeah.
So you're giving us the power back. Thank you, Alex.
Yeah. Exactly.
Yeah. So I do want to touch a little bit on the other apps that you had tried to make before you found success with Paparazzi. What generally is your process when you're trying to make a new app, seeing how you can adapt to user behavior, and give us some examples of what some of those apps were?
We've always been very kind of mission driven, and some people don't build in that way. Some people, but that's just the only way that I know how to build things. And my brother and I, we've been on this journey for a while, and I think we've built a lot of things, and most of our shit like just didn't work. And so who knows? Maybe we're like really bad at building product, but that's just what I know. Like from our perspective, like we've always been excited about creating authenticity, or building for authenticity. And there's a lot of levers that you can pull to create authenticity. You can try to create more intimacy. You can try to create, there's different things that you can pull. So, we were kind of, before hitting Paparazzi, we were kind of like in this, well, we started off as TTYL, which was an audio social network. This is like before Clubhouse, like pre-pandemic and everything. But we built an audio social network because, we felt that audio was a medium that could make people feel closer. And, it was real time. It was, it was more intimate. And we kind of really had a strong thesis around that. And for like the first like year or year and a half of our journey, like we were the like audio social company that was like experimenting in that space. So we built like 4 or 5 different iterations of TTYL and kind of like realized that it wasn't going to work. So that's kind of like, where we started. And that didn't end up panning out. So I remember like, about a year or so in, like we kind of realized that it wasn't going to work. And, we went to our investors and like, hey, like, I don't think this is going to work. Like, we felt like, if one out of every, we kind of had to change our strategy a bit. So we were kind of thinking like, hey, if one out of every, like, this is like a random number that I just made up, but like if 1 out of 20 social apps takes off or really makes it, right? Like, cause you see new social apps every year, like, let's just do it 20 times. So me and my brother were like, all right, like let's change the strategy. Let's like
It's a
actually
statistical
try to
approach,
build,
yes.
yeah, let's try to build 20 apps. And if 20 of them, all flop, then maybe we're bad at what we're doing and we should, try to do something else. But let's try it 20 times and let's create this like mindset and this like environment or this permission to fail. and to fail often and to fail fast. Because, I think with TTYL, like we were really scared of like failing. We're like, oh man, this is the first company I've ever raised money for. Like I don't want this to like fail or whatever. But then I was like, okay, what if the strategy was to fail? Then we give ourselves the permission to do it. So we kind of went on this journey for a while. It was me and my brother. I hired this designer from Facebook named Nick Sareth, and he joined our team really early on, and he's been very instrumental in all of our in all of our iterations. And we just grinded it out. Like we were building a new app every 45 to 90 days, and at the end of that 90-day period, we would assess like, do we want to keep it, or do we want to cut it, or do we want to iterate on something new? And we just repeated that. And it was a grind. It was kind of like running without knowing if there was ever going to be a finish line. It was definitely a grind. We built this app called Typo, which was a live texting platform. So you could message your friends and they could see you typing as you were typing, and it would also record your face at the same time. Oh. Yeah, there was a lot of things that we built. Yeah. There was a lot of things that we built, and most of them were probably like not great ideas, but we were acting on instinct and acting on inspiration. I think we were just focused on like moving as fast as we could, because everything that we built, every time we built something, we learned something from it, or like we learned how to like, build a friend finder. We learned how to, market the product better, etc. So yeah, it's been a crazy journey. Like I think a lot of people thought Poparazzi was like an overnight success, but it really was like, I think probably like the 10th or 11th app that we built. Before it took off. And so
when you were deciding to yeet an app or iterate on it or whatever, was that an internal testing decision, or did you test it with users and outsiders?
It's tough, because I think at our stage, like, consumers don't really know what they want. Well, they all know what they want, but they're not going to be able to like communicate or articulate that. Yeah. So you kind of have to read between the lines a little bit. I would say like that was like my sole job, was because I'm not an engineer. I mean, I do some design and stuff, but I wasn't, my biggest, role in all of this was like deciding when to push on something and when to kind of cut something. And, we had to make the call to cut stuff, and, team did not like cutting things because there's always this feeling of sunk costs, and we put all this time into it. But, we were looking for like, a breakout, and, we, that was our process. And, there's no like formula for it. It was very just like kind of a gut feeling. Like, sometimes we would look at the data and it wouldn't look great, and we would decide to keep pushing. Or sometimes we would look at the data and it would look promising, but we would cut things. So it really just came, it's a very holistic view on something, and, we're just acting on instinct and gut feeling. And, thankfully I was able to build a team around me that was very, very supportive of, whatever we wanted to do. And we had an investor group that was also extremely supportive of that journey. Okay. And so, yeah, I guess
to that end, if you're giving yourself a chance to fail 19 times out of 20, how and you're paying a designer, how are you sustaining yourself during this? Was there a fear that you would run out of funds?
Oh yeah, of course. Like we were literally on the brink of running out of cash, and then COVID happened, which there were a lot of things that we built that we couldn't launch because of COVID. But there were also a lot of things that were ideas that were inspired because of COVID. So like I think there's, it was definitely a weird time, and before we launched Poparazzi, we were almost out of cash, so we came down to the wire. So yeah, we were very worried. Like we were running off of the seed round that we had raised for TTYL. Okay. Our investors were very supportive, and were like, just keep building, keep going. Like, we don't, not that we don't want your money back, but it's just like, we believe in you guys still, and they were very supportive. Right. And so that allowed us to keep going. But yeah, we were tight on cash. We almost ran out of cash. So.
I mean, that's a testament to finding the right investors, because they believed in you as founders and producers, and not just the one idea. So that's great. I'm very happy for you. Yeah. Sounds like you've come to a good place since then. Okay, before we let you go, Alex, we have a fun segment. It's called Shoot Your Shot. So I would like to know, what is your moonshot idea? This is your biggest dream, your wildest ambition. It could be professional, personal. It is your chance now to put it out in the world and shoot your shot.
I feel like this is a pretty big moonshot, the thing that I'm working on now. But
yes, but anything but that, Alex. You have other things in life.
Yeah. I love playing golf. Like it's something that I do, like, on a lot, like very, very frequently. I'm actually obsessed with it. And
Okay.
I would like to get to scratch. I'm currently like a 5
I don't know what
handicap.
that means. What does that mean?
Okay. Oh, just like you can shoot under par. You can like, you're pretty
What
good.
does that
at,
mean?
like,
What is the equivalent for another sport?
like, I don't know. There's actually not really a parallel to being like a scratch golfer, but
Just
it
being
means
that
you're good.
good.
And
Yeah.
And then and I think it would be really cool to kind of apply a lot of the like, to build a kind of new golf club. Like, I live out in LA, and a lot of the clubs out here, it's like extremely exclusive. They're like impossible to get into, and it's not about money or anything like that. They're just very exclusive and kind of old money. I kind of want to build like a new generation club where, it's more culture forward and, forward thinking. Because I think the game of golf, I love, and I played it competitively growing up and stuff, but it's very, it's hard. It's not the most inviting sport, and I kind of want to make it a little bit more accessible and more fun too. I'm building a digital space right now, but building a kind of physical space on, with trees and lakes and stuff would be pretty cool. So yeah, that'd be cool.
I love it. I would love to go to the opening of this new age golf club when it's ready. I can't wait. Very last thing. It's a quick little game. It's called Bullish or Bearish. And this is the social media startup edition. So I'm just going to read you some relatively new-ish social media startup descriptions, and you tell me if you're bullish or bearish on them. So here we go. And you've probably heard of some of these. I know you've heard of some of these. Okay, first up, Yubo. It's a Gen Z-focused social media platform that eschews influencers and ads and does not sell its user information. The platform brings in revenue through upselling its customers as opposed to more traditional methods. According to Fast Company, there are no ads on Yubo, and more importantly, no influencers. Instead, users hopscotch between small video chat rooms where they're encouraged to meet new friends, play games, and drop money on add-ons. I feel like you'd be bullish on this personally. What are you? Alex?
Bullish.
Yeah.
Bullish. Yeah.
Sounds like similar vibes to Poparazzi. It's like, we're not monetizing your data. It's about authenticity. It's the friend graph.
I don't want to bet against anyone. Like I'm bullish. Like
This game is not going to work then. If you're bullish on everything. All right,
also, I feel like I know a lot of the people in the space, so it's like,
sure,
bullish.
Yeah. I got you. This is an opportunity, at the very least, for us to learn about new social startups. Anyway. Okay, next up, some more, which stands for something more, centers around meaningful dating and combating a superficial approach to finding a relationship. Users only get to see a blurred version of a potential match's profile pictures. That is, until they start chatting. The more time you spend messaging each other, the clearer the person's photos become. It emphasizes forming emotional connections, and it has raised about $2 million in seed funding in 2021.
That's a cool idea. It's something that like we thought of at some point too. I've never built anything like it, but I think it's a cool idea. I'm bullish on it.
Great. It kind of reminds me of Banter from Ted Lasso. I don't know if you watch Ted Lasso, but it's like you don't actually see the person. All you do is banter and chat with them, which I think,
that's cool.
That's cool. Don't judge a book.
I think it's interesting. It's like putting the person first. I think with most dating apps, almost all of them, you kind of have to judge people by how they look, and this is kind of a different approach. So it'd be interesting to see how that shakes out.
Great.
I'll try it out.
Yes. Likewise, downloading it now. All right. Well, we're bullish on some more. Last one, and you knew we'd ask about this one. Be Real. It's a French social media app launched by GoPro alum Alexis Barriat in 2020. So you already know this, but for our listeners, the app's intention is to create candid photos and authentic content where users receive a notification at a random time once a day saying, time to be real. And this opens up a 2-minute window for the user to post a picture of what they are currently doing. The purpose of this is to capture an authentic, unfiltered snapshot of a user's life. Bullish or bearish on Be Real?
I'm bullish.
Do you use Be Real?
No, I have it. I don't use it every day, but I use it every once in a while, and I have a lot of friends on it. So I think they're doing well. Like they've been able to. I don't know the details or anything behind it, but like they've been number one for a while, and they must be retaining and doing pretty well. So I'm bullish.
Yeah, all right. And other social platforms are trying to sort of copy it a little bit. So that's a good sign. In the words of Alex Ma, it is validating.
Yeah.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Okay, well, you're just a bullish kind of fellow, and we're going to leave things there. This has been a very wonderful conversation. Thank you, Alex, for joining us on Business Casual.
Thank you. It was nice to meet you.
This is Business Casual, and I'm Nora Ali. You can follow me on Twitter at Nora K. Ali, and I would love to hear from you. If you have ideas for episodes, comments and thoughts on episodes you loved, fun segment ideas, shoot me a DM and I will do my best to respond. You can also reach the BC team by emailing businesscasual@morningbrew.com or call us. That number is 862-295-1135. If you haven't already, be sure to subscribe to Business Casual on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you listen. And if you like the show, please leave us a rating and a review. It really, really helps us. Business Casual is produced by Catherine Millsop and Olivia Mead. Additional production, sound design, and mixing by Daniel Marcus. Kate Brandt is our fact checker. Sarah Singer is our VP of Multimedia. Music in this episode from Daniel Marcus and the mysterious Breakmaster Cylinder. Thanks for listening to Business Casual. I'm Nora Ali. Keep it business and keep it casual.
Business Casual.
If you like what you saw and you like what you heard, you can listen to the entire episode of this podcast, Business Casual, anywhere you get your podcasts. And please go ahead and subscribe to the Morning Brew YouTube channel and go ahead and click on that alarm bell, that thing right there, so you can be alerted anytime there's a new video.